I'm not Brad West. I'm Malcolm Brody, as you know. Chair West has pulled in sick. I'm told he's going to join us online, but apparently he is really quite ill. So we'll call the meeting to order. Let's see. I'll first of all start with the land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge, respect, and celebrate the Indigenous nations on whose treaty and unceded territories we are fortunate to live, work, and operate. We recognize that in planning and managing the region's transportation systems, we have a role to play in supporting reconciliation with Indigenous people. So with that, may I have a motion on the agenda?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Anything to add or change? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Then we have the minutes from September 26th. May I have a motion to adopt? So that's moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? Not seeing anything. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to public delegates. As you know, we allow time at the beginning of the meeting for public delegations. We just have one today, Nathan Davidovich. There he is. Come on forward, Nathan. So we have a 3-minute maximum on the presentation, and we generally don't take any questions for the delegates. So, sir, Nathan, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor Brody and members of the Mayor's Council. I'm talking about, my name is Nathan Davidovich, and I'm talking about item number 3 on your agenda. This fund will not start till April of 2026, ? The present federal government might change after the 2025 election, so we need to have a plan B because we're not really sure that this fund is would be available even. I think we would have been better if we kept the BC Transit funding model instead of the new model in 1999. BC Transit gets around 50% of their operating funding from the BC government, and TransLink gets almost 0%. Who should we blame on this financial situation of TransLink? I would say that we should blame the former late 1990s GVRD chair and staff for the lack of knowledge and making promises that they could not fulfill. There is only one elected person who knows the sad history and the mistake that were made over the last 45 years. And it's Don Bell from North Vancouver. And maybe he can help before he retires like our old Steve did. The motion from October 1, 2015 meeting of the Mayor Council should be reapproved. I send you copies of that motion. As soon as the new minister is appointed next month, you should present your proposals so it can be incorporated into the BC 2025-26 budget. In case you are not aware, all the BC political parties have copied items from Connecting BC, the BC Federation of Labor 10-year transit plan, which only few of you endorsed. Connecting BC is way better than your staff plan called Access for Everyone. So you better make some changes to your 2022 plan before meeting with the new minister, because he and maybe I presume Mayor West is not here, but but I know he's very interested in this item. So there is a video yesterday on YouTube called "Canada Has a Soft Corruption Problem in Infrastructure." Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Nathan. So that brings us to the report of the chair. I'm told that Chair West will be providing that to us. Brad, we'll go to you.
All right, thanks, Malcolm. And I've returned from Ottawa with not a pile of federal money, but something else. So thank you to everyone in Ottawa for the flu or whatever it is. I just want to begin by acknowledging all the candidates who ran for election in the most recent provincial election, Metro Vancouver. We all know that running for office is not easy, and serving in office is even harder. So I want to thank those who stepped forward. I know all of my colleagues will join me in congratulating Premier Eby and his team on forming a majority government, and also congratulating the other leaders of the political parties. This election was a very close one, and I think it sends a message to all elected officials at the provincial level that our residents expect them to work with us to deliver real, tangible improvements to the transit system. As we all know, Mayor's Council has developed a transit plan, and it would provide for a massive expansion of our transit service throughout the entire region. We've heard that residents are tired of the endless announcements and planning and consultation. They want to see better service. They want that to happen now. And as we all know, we have a plan to do that, but it does require the cooperation and support of the provincial government. And I am very hopeful that the provincial government will work with us right away to begin to implement this. I'm looking forward to meeting with the new minister responsible for TransLink as soon as Premier Eby has named his cabinet. We have a deadline of April 30th, 2025. So timelines are short to work together and secure sustainable funding so that we can avoid that doomsday scenario of significant cuts and reduction to service across the region. We do have enough time to get this done, but it is going to require us to be very focused and the province to be very focused on delivering results. I just also want to share, as I mentioned, recently returned from Ottawa alongside Vice Chair Brody and Mayor Buchanan. And while we're in Ottawa, participated in a national transit summit. We recognize that it's going to take strong and unified voices from across the country to convince the federal government that they need to step up and meet their responsibilities to the transit system. And in that vein, we had a first of its kind meeting of mayors and transit board chairs from other big cities in Canada, representing the vast majority of the transit agencies across our country. And I want to thank everyone who worked very hard to pull that together. We had some great discussions, found that although there are unique aspects to all of our systems, we're all facing very similar issues. And by speaking with one strong and united voice, we'll have a much better potential of bringing the federal government to the table and deliver on the aspects of our plan that we need their support for. I also wanted to recognize the movement here in Metro Vancouver, a movement of transit riders who are also involved and are working with their counterparts across the country. So it's great to see transit riders also get themselves organized on a national basis. With that, I just want to end by recognizing Rob Fleming, who served as our minister for the last 2+ years. Rob's commitment to public transit and his determination to work with us resulted in some very positive things. And I know that my colleagues will join me in wishing him the very best. He certainly leaves big shoes to fill. And I know he's contributed to our province and to public life, not only on this file, but in a number of capacities. So we'll miss him. I will miss him as a colleague and a friend, but I'm sure that he will enjoy life after politics. Excuse me. I think that's probably just enough for me to report on. So I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are, Mayor Brody. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair West. Are there any comments or questions arising out of that chair's report? All right. So let's move on to the report of the Joint Finance Committee. An update on the Canada Public Transit Fund. So we'll go to Sarah Ross.
I'll just start real quick. Good morning, Kevin Quinn, CEO of TransLink. Thanks so much for having us. Good to see everyone this morning. As you all know, we have significant infrastructure needs, and our Access for Everyone plan, I think, lays out a really good foundation for those projects, and it will require all levels of government to really come together to fund these critical projects. And the level of funding that we need is substantial. Sarah Ross is here to talk about the Canada Public Transit Fund status update, and I'll turn it over to her. Sarah.
Good morning, and thank you. The Canada Public Transit Fund, we had been calling the Permanent Transit Fund. It was officially renamed. This dedicated funding for transit was announced by the federal government in February 2021, and the program was officially launched just this past July. It's $3 billion in capital funding beginning in 2026. Now, that's the amount for the whole country, with 4 objectives of supporting public transit and active transportation, increasing the supply of housing, mitigating climate change and increasing resilience and reducing GHG emissions, and improving access to sustainable modes of transportation for everyone, but especially for equity-deserving groups. The way the fund is structured is there are three funding streams, with most of the funding in that middle column on your chart, which is called the Metro Regional Agreements. So starting on the left, there's a baseline capital funding, which is about $500 million a year of that $3 billion. And that's dedicated to provide stable funding direct to transit agencies, primarily to support the baseline work of state of good repair. TransLink submitted in the summer an expression of interest as part of the process for this funding. We have received confirmation from the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure Canada that we've been confirmed to be an eligible agency, and we will be receiving baseline capital funding. We are still awaiting the exact amount of funding that we will receive under that stream. The second and most significant stream of funding is that Metro Regional stream, which is approximately, $2 billion a year. And this is going to, at a regional level, based on a competitive process for major regions in the country, to really advance those objectives of the program, and particularly focused on expansion. The process for this, again, is to submit an expression of interest jointly with the province, which we did in mid-September, and we're awaiting official confirmation that our expression of interest has been accepted. And then the next step is to prepare what's called an integrated regional plan to set out a reasonable plan for transit in the region based on what the needs of the region are. And following that, you then negotiate Metro Regional Agreements to confirm the specific amounts of funding. The third stream is targeted funding, and this has not been initiated yet. This will be, we understand, to be more focused on rural, maybe specific active transportation programs. So at this point, we are focused on the Metro Regional Agreements stream. We've been developing the integrated regional plan. We've been working, TransLink staff have been working on that. We were working with the provincial government in advance of the interregnum period. And once the interregnum is complete, we will resume working in collaboration with the provincial government to submit that plan. It is unclear as to whether the timing for this will we can move quickly enough to have this in place before April. Certainly, that's very much our objective. And federal funding is critical to be able to advance the expansion needed in this region. I will point out, if we go to a federal election, this entire process on the federal side will pause. We will always make sure from a TransLink staff perspective that we are ready to go. There are a number of other slides in the deck that essentially just summarize what I've just said. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Comments and questions? We'll go to Councillor Asbinson. Brent?
Yeah, so this is $3 billion a year. Is it over 3 years? Is there an end date in the report of the $3 billion per year?
It's a $3 billion a year annually on an ongoing basis. That's what the federal government has committed to. And that's, again, I want to emphasize, that's $3 billion for the whole country.
Yes, and do you have any idea if it would be based on population transit use? Have they given any indication how that would be broken down across the country?
The baseline funding envelope is based on, my understanding is based on a formula to do with ridership. The Metro Regional Stream is not based on a ridership population formula. Typically, previous federal government programs, such as the public transit infrastructure program that we had in the past, had been based on a formula. The federal government is taking a different approach this time, and they're looking for the plans that will be the most ambitious and the most advance the federal interests and the objectives, as I outlined, of this plan. So we need to put forward a very robust plan, and we will then await a confirmation from the federal government as to how much of that envelope we can count on for. We do anticipate, we're submitting a 10-year plan. We do anticipate receiving confirmation of a 10-year funding envelope. It's not we have to wait every year to find out.
The only comment I heard in that one was based on federal interests. This means it leaves it open to a bigger interpretation of where funding goes.
Well, I meant federal interests in terms of what's set out as the objectives of the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Little, Mike?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm trying to recall when we did the Cure Congestion campaign about 4 years ago. I believe the number at the time was that our rolling average of funds coming from the federal government was between $300 and $350 million. And so here, if we're talking about 10% of $2 billion or 10% of the project as a whole, is this actually an increase in federal funds, or is this materially a decrease in federal commitment to transit going forward?
I think I would need to know what level of, what amount of that $2 billion we will be receiving. I think one thing we have been very clear is, regardless of how it compares to previous funds, we know, and the Mayor's Council has been very clear in advocating for this, that it's not enough to meet the needs of the full needs of our region, but we will be, this is where we're at, and we need to work with this at least as a starting point. So we certainly, when we have more information, we could provide that. It is providing a permanent commitment, which we didn't have before. We had more focused, time-limited envelopes,
Mike?
as it stands today.
Sure. In your question, I think you suggested that you had heard before that we are receiving on average around $300 million a year from dedicated transit, federal dedicated transit funding. That number is probably closer to $200 million a year, so maybe 250. So I think the answer to your question is the Canada Public Transit Fund has the potential to deliver more. As Sarah just mentioned, it depends on exactly how it's delivered. But in general, the Canada Public Transit Fund envelope is bigger than the dedicated transit funds that were originally announced in 2015. I think what we would say is, although they are bigger and not insignificant, or not insignificantly so, it's a fair bit bigger. Our needs have grown much more quickly than the funds. So the funding envelope has grown over that time as well. And so, as Sarah said, although this is still a significant amount of money, it falls well short. Maybe it's short by half or even more than what we would need to expand the system if we kept the federal funding proportion the same as it has been, which probably means the federal proportion of our expansion plan is going to have to be smaller, and provincial and regional shares should be bigger.
Thank you very much. And Chair, if I may follow up, I was just, my recollection of that campaign was that the math was, maybe it's not the dedicated funds you're talking about specifically, but when we did the math of providing for Canada Line and then nothing, 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 and then providing for Evergreen and then nothing, 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 that the rolling average that we were talking about in the Cure Congestion campaign was higher than that. But I take your point, and the amount of growth that's happened, our projected growth, inflation and construction costs, I don't feel like we're further ahead. I have to say that in the discussions that we had when we talked about the PTIF originally, was that this was going to become a genuinely reliable stream going forward. And what I'm hearing now is we're going to have to apply. We're going to have to apply. We're going to have to, see if our projects fit. The point of having a consistent fund was that the unsexy projects like replacing a 40-year-old escalator on the Granville SkyTrain station that couldn't attract the political will for them could still get funded reasonably. And so it sounds like we're still, at least in part, going to be doing project-based approvals rather than entire system consistent funding at our discretion based on the need within our system. Maybe I'm misreading that.
We're
Why don't I start and then pass it off to you? I think the first part of your question was around, does this represent an increase? So you're right. In addition to the 200 million-ish or so that we're receiving in dedicated transit funding per year over the last, whatever it is, decade, we're also receiving money from the federal gas tax fund, which is now called the Canadian Community Benefits Fund, I think. And that's right now, I think that's at about $150 million a year. So, if you start adding those up, you're getting to those numbers. But look, to be very clear, the Public Transit Fund, the $3 billion a year envelope, we actually advocated for around that number in about 2020. The program was then approved in 2021. At the time, a lot of those things you just mentioned hadn't actually happened. Since then, as you say, we've seen significant inflation. We've seen a change in ridership patterns. I think in general, transit is now being expected to deliver a lot more for federal and provincial interests around climate change and housing and congestion. So transit is being expected to do a lot more. Our costs have grown faster. Population has grown faster than at any time, at least in our city in history. All of that means that what we thought might have been roughly enough in 2020, in 2026 is falling well short if you want to see the federal proportion of transit expansion remain the same. It's definitely going to be smaller if this number is kept the same. In terms of your question around predictability, I'll maybe turn it to Sarah, because that's also an important component.
So we're certainly in the program launch stage where we are going through a lot of applications. On the baseline, that's a kind of a, will be, we've gone through the process of applying, and then we'll receive confirmation of what an ongoing entitlement, I shouldn't use the word entitlement, but an ongoing allocation will be on an annual basis. So we're not having to apply on an annual basis. I'm not sure whether it's a 10-year confirmation on the baseline. Maybe 10 years later we need to apply, assuming the program continues to exist. And then again, for the Metro Regional process, ideally what happens is we submit our 10-year plan. That's confirmed and supported. And then it is through a process through sort of every few years doing a Metro Regional agreement to confirm exactly what projects and exactly what the other funding contributions would be from the region, from the province, from other funding partners.
If I may, Chair, just to clarify that one small bit. So a majority of the funding will go towards our priorities based on need within our system, or are we still going to have to get them approved individually by the federal government?
The federal will submit an integrated regional plan that will lay out what a broad program of investment, specific program with specific projects. And then my understanding, and this is, we'll say this is a new process, and TransLink is kind of ahead of most of the rest of the country. So we're also still figuring this out, and it's trying to become clear. But that we would get approval for that integrated regional plan, and then an understanding of what the amount of funding the federal government can make available. And then I think we would then work through exactly which projects it would be allocated to in what phasing, and what our regional, provincial, and other partner contributions would be, and what the overall program will be. We would have to enter into an agreement that specifies this, which is standard in how we have done this on, there's always a behind the scenes detailed agreement that gets put in place to access both federal and provincial funding.
Mayor Buchanan, Linda?
Thank you very much, Chair, and my apologies for everyone for being late. I had to take a call. Thank you very much, Ms. Ross, for your presentation. I'm just curious on the slide that speaks to the 3 streams, and the Metro Regional Agreements is the one that we're looking at. Will an agreement do you believe in the conversations you've had that an agreement could be signed by April in time for our investment plan?
Certainly that is very much our objective. Whether we can complete that is not currently clear. And I will say, if you join late, you may not have heard it. I will note, if we go to if there is a federal election, then this will pause the entire program.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was here for your whole presentation, so thank you for that. I guess that's one of the things that myself and Mayor Brody and Mayor West really, in the meetings that we had this week, were really looking at solidifying that, there's been a lot of conversation over the last, I don't know how many months around this Metro agreement. It was referenced at the Transit Summit on Monday from Minister Fraser's parliamentary secretary about having 2 Metro regional agreements. But really what we're trying to stress is we need that commitment prior to probably February in order for us to be moving forward. And really that this, it feels like every program, new programs, and they're asking for thousands of pages of documents and this, that, and the other. And the process is too cumbersome. And surely when I guess what the impression I was left, and my colleagues might think differently, that we are very much ahead of most people, including the federal government, in terms of how to respond. And so it just kind of feels like the can's getting kicked down the road. And I think we're going to have to do a lot of work here with our colleagues in the federal level to really impress upon them that we have the plan, we're ready to go. We need the money now, or at least the commitment, that signed commitment, so that we can continue to move forward. I just feel that without that, we're just getting caught in this whole quagmire of early elections being called and the politics of it. And meanwhile, we have a plan that's, we believe, is solid. It's very unusual to be unanimously approved. And I just hope we can continue to put the pressure on and get that agreement signed in principle so that we can move forward. And I'll probably have more to say in close, Chair. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Anybody else have any questions?
Chair Brody, if I may, I just want to make sure I was quite clear about the process. The next step is for we're awaiting that official confirmation. I expect that very imminently. The next step is for province and TransLink to jointly submit an IR, that integrated regional plan. So that is the next step. So in that sense of the timing, that's on both the province and TransLink. I will say the TransLink, we've done an extensive amount of work, but we need to have that submitted. And then once we've submitted that, then the timing ball is in the court of the feds as we wait for them. So there's sort of 2 key things. We need to expedite submission of the integrated regional transportation plan to the feds, because until we do that, they don't have anything to evaluate in their process. And then we have to wait for them, and hopefully they'll do a quick turnaround in confirming that. So those are the 2 kind of key things driving the timing.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, may I have a motion to receive? Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, staff.
I'm coming to body us out of the meeting.
Okay, then we're going to go to the report of the executive director. Turn it over to Mike Buda. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a short report on our activities during the provincial election and start to introduce the discussion of what comes next. So as you all likely recall, we launched our election strategy, a public engagement strategy back in July when we sent a letter to all candidates, or all parties, and actually all Metro Vancouver candidates, asked them to create a $3.4 billion per year Access for Everyone fund. That fund, we did a fair bit of work to come up with that number. It's not plucked from thin air. It's designed to deliver about the first third, or as much of the first third of the Access for Everyone plan that we can deliver in a 10-year investment plan starting in April. So of that $3.4 billion, there's $500 million in new sustainable operating revenue, which is critical not just to support expansion of transit as outlined in the Access for Everyone plan, but also to address our $600 million a year structural deficit. In fact, as you well know, the structural deficit has to be addressed first before we can begin expansion, and then $2.9 billion per year in senior government contributions to the capital projects in the FA plan. And just relevant to the discussion we just had, these are senior government contributions from both provincial and federal governments. We also called for the creation of a provincial transit fare discount or exemption program for low-income youth, adults, and seniors, and called for a review of TransLink's governance structure. So we sent a questionnaire with these questions to party leaders. We then delivered a fairly significant amount of public engagement, really designed to inform and educate the public on the Access to Everyone plan and what is in there and how it'll benefit them and their communities, and also the critical role that the next government is going to play in enabling this region to actually deliver the Access for Everyone plan, and then to encourage and facilitate interested members of the public to communicate directly with their candidates, with parties and party leaders to ensure that they understand as those who are aspiring to form the next government, that these are priorities that they should adopt themselves should they form government. And we did that through a number of ways, obviously lots of social media engagement, lots of, I know many of you spoke with the media in lots of different ways, delivered some activities, events with partners, and so on. So we got responses from all parties. We produced a voter's guide that we released about 10 days before Election Day so that regular people, voters, could understand where each of the parties stood on our issues. I'll go through them in a second. Maybe I'll start with the party that won the election is going to form government, the New Democratic Party. So you'll see them here. The first commitment, and I'm picking an excerpt from their platform, but they said it in several different ways that they'll work with the Mayor's Council on TransLink to deliver the Access for Everyone plan. In particular, they specifically called out that they would fund and build the first 3 rapid transit lines that we've identified as the first 3 priority BRT lines in the Access for Everyone plan, which are those between Langley and Maple Ridge, along King George Boulevard from Surrey to White Rock, and then from Metrotown to the North Shore. So there was a specific commitment to that. They've committed also to extend SkyTrain to UBC, make transit free for seniors in off-peak hours, expand commuter rail and bus service into the Fraser Valley, including to extend West Coast Express to Chilliwack and launch express bus service along the shoulder of Highway 1, develop a business case for transit service between Sea to Sky and Lower Mainland, and then there's some interesting commitments around Handy Dart and Transit Police. All of these actually, except for, in some ways, the last one, are very, very consistent with the Access for Everyone plan. Because the results of the election, as you know, are very tight, and it's going to be an interesting legislature, I think it's important to look at what all parties have said. And I think, and if you look at our voters guide online, you'll see all the detailed commitments that each of the parties made. But they all made very clear commitments, repeated commitments to ensuring, firstly, that they need to work with us to address the structural deficits so we can avoid those potential transit service cuts that we've identified could happen next year if we don't address that deficit. They've all made commitments to the importance of expanding transit and to working with us to deliver the Access for Everyone plan. So look, the bottom line is, I think in our view, or at least staff's view, this all-party consensus on delivering the Access for Everyone plan, for addressing the structural deficit and avoiding those potential transit service cuts, forms a really strong basis for both the new government and the legislature to move ahead with us quickly, so we can come to an agreement by April 30th, 2025, so we can approve that investment plan by then that will address the structural deficit and begin delivering that new transit and other transportation services we've outlined in the Access for Everyone plan. So that's my report, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks. We'll go to Mayor Harvey. George?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm very concerned with regards to the last line that was just mentioned on the uploading of the TransLink police to the province. I'm very concerned with regards to the effects that could have on our public safety. At this current time, the TransLink works extremely well with the integrated teams within the Lower Mainland, RCMP, and the municipal private police departments. But I think this is something that we should really ask, Mr. Chair, for more information from staff as to how did this come about? What is the province's thoughts on this? Because again, I think all of us as mayors are very concerned with regards to the possible public safety effects that this would have within the transit system. I'll leave that with you, Mr. Chair.
Mike, is there anything more than just that one line that you can tell us about?
So I mean, that's a very, very brief summary of what was in their platform. What was in their platform spoke to the vision of integrating the services that transit police deliver to our transit system, along with other provincial policing priorities, I believe around liquor licensing and a few other provincial responsibilities. So certainly the NDP and their platform, and we've spoken to them and tried to understand what that platform commitment spoke to. They're not suggesting that transit police wouldn't continue to deliver exactly that service. I think they're talking about looking at how to really leverage and maximize the great value that the transit police provide this region for those others. I will say, this is my editorializing, that I think this is not, well, in fact, the party made it very clear this isn't something that they would plan to move ahead with quickly, and they would definitely not this is something they would move ahead with in absolute partnership with TransLink and the Transit Police Board. So I don't think we see this as something that's planned to be one-sided and quick deal. I think they're looking at ways to both enhance the services that the transit police deliver to our region and also support TransLink and our structural deficit. So I think at this point, we feel like there's lots of room and time to look at all of these angles so that whatever solution we end up with is going to protect the critical services the transit police deliver.
Mayor Harvey, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just one extra comment. Mayor Brody and others that have been here for quite some time, we can remember when the TransLink police wasn't there, and the province put the onus on City of Vancouver, City of Burnaby, and others at that time as the Expo line was starting to extend. I'm worried again. I'm quite worried that where this is going. So I hope we make it a priority that even if they state that it's not a concern or something that move on quickly, we need to keep on top of it. So that's my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, it is reminiscent of the crime train, I think they called it way back in the day. Councillor Asbjornson.
Yeah, I share Mayor Harvey's concerns, and I thank him for raising that. My other question comes down to is, like, we just came through an election. We have a governing party that has a very slim majority to govern. And we talk about getting our funding. I suspect, I would think that we may get, again, temporary bridge funding of maybe $600 million a year for a couple of years until there's a majority government. If that is the case, how does that affect our funding for the federal stream?
I'm trying to understand your question. I think there's a couple of things.
My question basically is, I don't see a sustainable funding source coming from a provincial government with a slim majority not wanting to risk public backlash and continuing on with the bridge funding that we've had right now, and maybe they'll come with bridge funding of $600 million a year for 3 years. So if that's the case, and if that theoretically does happen, would that have an effect on our application to the federal government for federal funding?
Sure. Well, I mean, the only way that we can leverage federal funding is if A, the province and the region provide matching funding, and B, that we're doing that because we're able to and intend to expand transit. If we're not able to do that because we haven't really fully and properly addressed our structural deficit, then yes, it would affect it. I mean, I think there's lots of options on how the province can address it, but I think our ask in the provincial election is very clear that we need a sustainable long-term funding source, and that can take many different ways, so we can return TransLink to financial sustainability, so that we can actually focus on what this body has said we need to do, which is grow transit. So I think at this point, what we've heard from all parties, particularly the new government, is yes, we're going to address the structural deficit. I think that's what we'll have to remain focused on, and there'll be, I'm sure, a wide range of hypothetical scenarios we'll have to deal with along the way. But that's the goal, and also that's the very real financial reality we're facing.
Well, and I know our commitment is to fix that funding gap. I just know that in the provincial election, they talked about working with us. They didn't make commitments on it, but they made commitments on what I'd say the standard practice. Will fund the capital cost for this, capital cost for that. But our biggest issue is operating funds to operate the system.
Absolutely.
And so that's missing from all these commitments. So just, I guess I have a little, been around this in transit a long time and seen this movie one too many times. Thank you.
Well, we're going to find this out. Anything else? Anyone else? All right, may I have a motion to receive? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. I don't think we have any other business other than to note on your agenda, you'll see the next meeting is November 28th. And so we'll plan for that. May I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, we're now adjourned. We're going to go into a closed meeting. We'll adjust the room. We'll start in